All right, permaculture is an ethical design system. And when I was at Sister Farm, and Elise and I were talking about what the future would bring, and I had suggested we were applying for the Hilton Fund. And if you've ever filled out one of those applications, it's a big pain. And you can't send it on computer, and at least you couldn't that year. And so you have to cut out all these little strips and paste them onto the application. And we were so irritated by the time. And then the job description came out and said they were looking for a new executive director. I said, Elise, why don't you apply? You could get it and you'd make a good salary. I don't mind going to Los Angeles. I've said it in a generous way. But anyway, so that made us start thinking about, would we leave Sister Farm? And so we kept talking about the things that we were doing in terms of writing and editing and on her role and my doing the permaculture. We weren't going to be able to stay there forever, no matter how much energy you think you can. So we said, if we're going to do, I was saying to myself, if I'm going to do anything in Adrian, I better go now while I have, I can walk and move and lift things and so on. So we both decided that we would be available to do whatever. And so Elise got snatched up soon after for communications and technology. And then Attracta had asked me if I would kind of help figure out how we might work with our land here. So that's how I got here. And the first startup money we used was money that Sister Farm had in their account. And when we closed down the Sister Farm, that money then was brought here. And we had a letter from the board president who said she wanted to support doing permaculture at the Adrian Dominican Motherhouse. So that it was about $60,000 got transferred over. So that was just the initial fund. So just to let you know that it's sort of a continuation. And so I had developed permaculture at Sister Farm. And so if we want to look at it here, it is a design system, and it's based on the ethics of earth care, people care, and fair share. And this is like the ethics similar to, those are just, they did diagrams and graphics to show that, the three things. Not unlike our Seek Truth, Make Peace, Reverence Life. And so those would be like our vision from the 2004 chapter. And then when the general chapter this year started, the identity is who are we, what are we, why do we exist, and how do we utilize resources. So it seemed to me that there was some relevance between earth care, people care, fair share, and the permaculture as applied to agriculture, which would be land use, seemed to fit in. These are the principles that permaculture has developed. And it started in Australia, but then it branched out throughout the world. And it's especially viable in some places where you think that the weather and the land and everything is just not conducive. But what they've done is they were going around, they would find out from the native peoples, the indigenous peoples, the people that had to do farming in order to survive, what had they learned? And so it's kind of a collection of those learnings, and particularly ones that would apply to how we might relate with the land here. So these, there's 12 principles, and in the little brochures that you got in your folder, when they talked about the permaculture class, it has them like brief forms. Now you can do a whole chapter of a book on each one of them. But I think that when you think about what we're trying to do in the chapter, the first thing is observe and interact, contemplate. What is it? You think about it, and you pay attention to it. And so then these others are catch and store energy. We're only going to talk about 4 or 5 in this talk, but you can see them in that brochure. This is one that we definitely use invaluable renewables. That reduces dependency on scarce resources. Produce no waste, that's a little diagram of an earthworm, one of one of the most brilliant creatures that we have on Earth. What they do is they aerate the soil, and they make it smooth and slimy so that things root hairs can grow. And then they integrate. Remember, we had vision integration about 10 years ago to show that our 3 values, earth care, seek truth, make peace, reverence life, they're not separate. But when you see them in this diagram that they gave us for general chapter, you can see that when you talk about who we are and why do we exist, they all interconnect. And so that's kind of the challenge that we're facing now in the general chapter, is to see how we would develop what we want to do and say about ourselves, keeping those things in mind. And then another one that is very important for what we're doing here is use and value diversity. And diversity leads to greater resilience. And so we have cultural diversity and biodiversity. And those are 2 things that, if you only have a monoculture, like if everybody in the whole environment is white and male, then that's going to be a way that things, in our case, we're white and female. We have a few African Americans, we have a few Mexican Americans. Now we have a big influx of the Filipinos and the Dominican Republic. So we truly are a multicultural congregation. It's just that they're not all here, but they are a part of us. And so how do we value that diversity, and then how do we value biodiversity? And one of the big challenges of industrial agriculture is monoculture, because you have these huge fields of one crop. And if it gets some kind of disease, it can wipe out. Remember the potato famine in Ireland. So biodiversity means that you put a collection of plants together to make all of them safer and happier and more integrated. And if the bug only likes one kind of plant and you've got it mixed up, the bug doesn't have a whole place it can just eat up. So that's another value. And then use edges, value the marginal. And I think that's what we're trying to do when we say we are now a multicultural congregation, and that many of the women who have connected with us, in fact, understand what it's like to be marginal in a particular culture, or to be marginal in the United States, or to be marginal because of our values, or to be marginal because of whatever reason. And so that we value the marginal. And one of the things that you'll see when we look at the pond later, whenever you have 2 edges come together, like the water and the land, a lot of activity right there at the edges. So if you walk down, when it's not raining and schlucky, down to the Cosmic Walk, and you see our pond, and you can see that there's a lot of frog activity, and there's little minnows, and then sometimes there's birds down there. I've seen ducks, and a couple of years ago I saw even beavers. And so that's a place where life happens more intensely. All right. And we're going to stop in about 3 times for questions. So this was the first one, observe and interact. And to me, that's like contemplation. And then you see the beauty, and I remember that beauty's in the eye of the beholder. So how do we find beauty in all of Earth? So when we looked at our campus, the first time that I came to a meeting, that's when I first met Stan, we went in little golf carts all over. I didn't know how extensive the property was, and poor Christopher Matthias got stuck in his, and he had his good shoes on. He had walked through. He was over in one of these things around Siena. But anyway, the work people here that are in the maintenance said, we have a big problem with erosion. And it's right down here, adjacent to our cemetery. Sort of between Howell Highway and right about here in the cemetery. And what it was doing was the water was pouring down. When you think, here's at the top of our campus, you see all of these roofs, and you see all of these sidewalks and all these roads. All of these are impermeable surfaces, which means that the water hits and crashes down. And ideally, we ought to find ways to save all of that water, and we're in the process of trying to figure out how to do that. But in the meantime, what happened is all the water went crashing down to here, and there's like 4 little drainage things, and then it went into this one drain, which goes like this, and then it comes out across the ring road. And so, of course, it's thousands of gallons, you know, when you have a storm surge. And so that was just kind of ripping up here. So we hired Peter Bain, who runs the Permaculture Training Center, and his group is called Patterns of Abundance, which I think is a nice name, because when you talk about patterns, if you think that there is an abundance, then you act in a way. If you think there's less, then you start hoarding it. So to say it's a pattern of abundance changes kind of your mindset. So anyway, we thought, well, how can we do something about that? So Peter came, and he walked all around and said that one of the things that he would recommend is that we do what they call a great big basin here, and that we would need bulldozers, you know, to do that, but that if you stand here, this is where the first basin got done, and berms are the hills that you put around the basin. So you'll see that we have a big berm here, and then there's the basin, and then another berm, and then you can see some of these other berms that came on subsequently. So the idea was that you have, this is where the erosion is. And this is, I tried an experiment here when I first came, as I thought, I want to do something to see how stuff works here. And this is like an example of a lasagna garden, they call it. And so we started, and I had the 2 guys, that, you know, big guys in maintenance, and so we had these forks. So you'll see them in Stan's little clip. They're like a broad fork, and you know, when I was at Sister Farm, I could jump on them and move them back and forth. But anyway, there's 2 different sizes, so I had, you know, our strong guys from the maintenance there, and they would get, what they did is we did a rectangle, and they opened up the holes. And so then when we put on the manure and the compost and the shredded leaves and all of those things, then they have a little places they can trickle down. Manure and compost can trickle down so that you're starting to fertilize that whole section. And then on top of that, you put cardboard and then some more shredded things and the manure and so on, and leave it. But then I realized that we weren't going to have the community gardens in that section. So it's a nice fertile section if we ever want to do something in particular there. But it won't hurt. I mean, you're just adding fertility. So anyway, Peter came, and we got the plans and hired the bulldozer people. And so here was...
orientation. This was a playground for a school. There was a soccer field and, you know, the monkey bars and all that stuff. And all this terrain all the way down to the far tree line down there used to just sort of be one gentle slope. And they came out here and they cut the grass real low. And we have a system of drains out there. And then if you look at the way that the topography kind of does like a funnel coming out through here, it used to pick up all the water. All the water that fell here, all the water that fell on the roof, all the water that fell on the parking lot, and then all that stuff was funneled into pipes that run under the ground here. So what the water did was it hit these impermeable surfaces, and sometimes it hundreds of thousands of gallons of water. So that accelerates it as it goes downhill, and it was discharged through one single point down in the trees down there. And so it turned into a fire hose, and it cut a great big erosion ditch in the wet line down there. The roots were exposed, the trees start to fall, it becomes a self-perpetuating process.
So that was Stan's explanation to the college students about why we did these berms and swales, and basically it was to take advantage of the water being there, which is in short supply in a number of places. And so this was the design that was followed, was to bring it into some kind of basin. Any questions about that? Well, it's a different philosophy, because if you're a mechanical engineer and the people have what they call a water problem, you know, that philosophy would say to get rid of the water as fast as possible. In permaculture, you say, what you want to do is hold the water, and you want to spread it out and sink it, and then it stays in the soil. And water is so precious that, you know, just have thousands of gallons just going down and muddying up the River Raisin instead of staying here. So that was a switch. So, yeah, Judith?
Did we have any kind of soil evaluation of what kind of soil we
Yes,
have
yes.
here in different places?
Yes, Stan, you have the microphone? He did.
Hello? There we go. Yep.
Why don't you stand up, Stan, so they can...
Sorry. The question was, have we done any soil testing? And the answer is yes. In July last year, we did 31 points all over the campus, 12 plugs from each one, makes them sent them to the University of Massachusetts Soil Testing Laboratory. And so we've got a very comprehensive soil profile. If I had it here, we've got kind of a nice big chart with one of these sort of satellite images, and it has all the 31 points with the results of each one of the tests. And it's pretty comprehensive. It's about 16 different indices on each one of them, and then they point these. We've got them numbered and all that. And so, yeah, we know what the pH, we know what the levels
Organic
of
matter.
the organic matter. We know things like lead, salinity, everything. And we've got some of the more esoteric things like the calcium ions and all that tells if people are going to start using amendments, what kinds to use. And long story short, we have a lot of sand here. So one of the most important things that we're doing right now is just adding organic matter as much as we can by the truckload.
Okay. All right, so we had to get these, what do you call them, bulldozers to come. So the first berm is the one that you can see when you walk out and aim down there. And it's wide and shallow and surrounded on both sides with a berm. Oops, pardon me. Okay. Peter Bain came with these measuring things. It's like what do you call it? Survey equipments. And so they had the topography measured, and somebody else would be down at the other end. And then that's how they knew where to do the berm. In the middle there, you'll see that there's a cover, and the cover was for that one drain that happened to be the one that was spilling most of the water in. And so they built one at the other end of the garden. You can see it. But then we just happened to happily discover this one in what they call the borrow pit. I had to learn what that meant here. It meant that there was a place that people dumped stuff, and so the maintenance department guys called it the borrow pit. So anyway, we found that this thing was in the borrow pit, and it was some kind of part of, I guess, a big, system of something. Anyway, it was perfect. The size was perfect, and so the guy that had a forklift brought it, and I said, would you come bring it? So he put it here, and then the permaculture people were thrilled because it exactly fit over. And so the idea is that the water comes roaring in, and besides spreading out, it has to come up at least to fill that whole basin, and then enough to come over the top of that crown before the water does what it did before. So it's another way to encourage storing it and spreading it. So it was painted and is put in here. Now this is after we planted seeds and so on, and the water was kept. This was the first rain garden, and remember it was the part where the water came roaring in. And so the idea is that the plants like their feet wet, so you try to get native plants, or we got native plants, and ones that like to be in moist surroundings because it stays, and of course with the rain these days, it's pretty much moist everywhere. So that was one of them. And then this is a close-up. And we got a number of different Michigan native plants. And some of them are flowers and some of them aren't, and so on. So there's a great biodiversity in those rain gardens. We did a couple of others and they weren't as successful as this. All right, another principle is use and valuable renewable resources and services. And when I first got here, the horse is a very apt symbol for this one because I found out that we were letting the guys from the, what do you call it, the playgrounds, yeah, use the end of our property to store the manure. And so, I mean, they had worked it out, and I thought, well, I'm pretty happy about that because you can't have too much manure, I thought. And then, and it kept collecting and collecting, and then until we had the permaculture design, I must confess to a little anxiety that what are we going to do with all of that? But then we thought, you know, that's the main thing that gives fertility. So we have places that it can go. Now over here on the right, that's the newest pile. So they are now doing it where we know where the newest is, which means it's the hottest manure and the one that would, you know, decompose faster, I mean, and more heated. And then this is the older, and you see how much stuff grows on it, you know, a lot of green matter. So when we look at the area down here, this are the LEAC homes, you know, people that need some protection, Lenawee something housing. And so these belong to that nonprofit, and there are families in need. I think it'll hold like 4 families, right? 4, yeah, 4. All right, and then the university has this ball field. Now this area right here behind the nursing building and over in here, this belongs to the congregation, and here. And Hankey Lane, remember years ago there used to be the Hankeys would come and they were in the maintenance department, and Mrs. Hankey came a couple weeks ago and she said everybody wanted to know what we were doing with all that cardboard, so now she knows. And anyway, she thought that was a very good idea. So this is the Hankey Lane. This it doesn't belong to us. This does. And then here's the black gold manure pile, and then the fairgrounds. And Sienna House is here. That's where the Formation House is now. And then this is the county fair stuff, and then we get up to the university, okay? So you got your orientation geographically. And this is just a little closer. If we do anything with the other parts of the land, this could very well be a wetlands, because especially that's where Christopher Matthias got stuck, and anybody that was with him had to walk in the soggy wet, you know. That was my first introduction. So this is a place that's naturally wet, and that could be another pond. And then these could be things that could be developed if we wanted to. And Sienna House has about 5 acres around it. They have 2 gorgeous apple trees that are right here, and I understand they might have a cherry tree. And anyway, that is another like 4 or 5 acres. I'm sorry, wrong side. What? Well, it depends. I talk about acres like ones that could be cultivated, because you've got the buildings. I mean, I have heard that it's like a little under 100 for the whole property. When we first bought this land in 18-something, right, it was 5 acres, and then we added acres to that. And so when I look at it, I just do it kind of big figures. We have like, 5, 10, 15, 20, and then we're working on 7 acres now. This permaculture site is 7 acres. Rosemary, do you have another figure? Yeah. So Rosemary says 110 acres with everything. So that would go from, line to line, and then all where there's buildings and so on. So, but the focus of the permaculture is what is able to be cultivated. Yes?
Is that for the university?
No, the university,
They have other acres.
and you can, yes, I mean, they're the ones that have the university buildings on it. And now some of the land that was the congregations has been either leased or sold to the university. So that's where you see the ball fields and things like that. But so far, this is still available. All right, let us move forward. Anyway, the pile continues, but the fairgrounds are being closed, sadly. And yeah, I mean, they're not going to, I mean, they're going to have the fair this year, but is the stand, is the county taking it over? Yeah, well, that's what I heard. Brett told me and stuff that they were going to eventually close it. Now, whether or not, it's still going now, but they don't have as many horses there. All right, anyway, so here's what it looks like when it's allowed just to keep growing. Not bad. And this is the black gold. When I was in Washington, D.C., we had the Ringling Brothers Circus come one time, and all the gardeners came because they would have all of that manure would go into this one great big container. It was like we were little kids in a toy shop. We all had our little boots on, and we're scooping it because we knew they had to feed the circus animals. They had to feed them well. So it was a great mixture, great biodiversity of manure. Strange. All right, integrate rather than segregate is another possibility. We talked about a lot when we were talking about vision integration. So if you imagine these are the areas that we want to be doing things, they're all important, they're all interconnected, and each one serves the whole, the good of the whole. And the many hands make light work. So this is a scene from, we had the Pheasants Forever is an organization that wants to encourage pheasants back into Michigan. So they're the ones that did one of the benches that are down at the garden. I mean, the pond. You'll see a Pheasants Forever. But then they had a whole pile of seeds that we bought. And so Mary is taking care of passing them around. And we had a little planting. And so everybody had a cup. And and so anyway, some of the seeds were sown too thickly at the beginning and not so much at the end. But I think when you saw that, the diversity of wildflowers several slides back, that was a result of what they were throwing around from Pheasants Forever. So we have one of the throwers here, Mary Middy's here, Molly's here, and I think that's Mary Irene, but I'm not positive. And Nelda and Joan. Yeah, they were both there. Now, Nelda spent a lot of time helping us get our files in order, and she was terrific. Stan did the first crack and divided everything into like 8 piles. He said we're just like the military, had triple copies of everything. And then Nelda came and used her organizational skills to try to get some order into our filing system. So all of the nice files in the permaculture office are the results of Nelda's work. She was really, really helpful. All right. Produce no waste. Well, we talked about that before, so we don't see the horse manure as a waste. We see it as a resource. And the old adage is waste not, want not, a stitch in time saves 9. And this is a little icon of the wonderful earthworm. We do have some worm bins down in the pole barn, if anybody wants to see them. But they're very nice. They work quietly, and then all they do is eat and poop. What? Yeah, we do composting. Let me come back to that. We have it right on campus, and I have to give you an overview to quit hitting the wrong thing there. It's down near the pole barn, and Judith asked about the composting. I'll come back later and show you exactly where it is. But what we've decided is right now we're not letting cardboard go off campus. We save it, Stan goes and picks it up, and so we have big piles around for the students that are coming Monday from the high school preaching. But anyway, right here, so you can see it was a place to store the straw while we're getting ready to do the hugelkulturs. And so somebody, a former prioress, said, what are we doing, planting cardboard now? All right, so one of the things that we've done there in the corner where you see these big mounds that people were asking about, it's called Hugelkultur, and it's a German name, and I met the man that sort of developed this. I went to a couple of workshops that Sepp Holzer is his name. But anyway, he's taken a piece of land that they said you can't grow this and that on it, you know, and so he's a very stubborn, and he said, yes, we will. And so he made all these things. Anyway, so the Hugelkultur was a design that at least he's taught in the United States. So you start with, like, this would be like a long, narrow trench, and we have the machine that can do that, luckily. So it's like 6 feet wide, maybe 5 inches deep, and you know, you just do, and then all of whatever sod was there, because this was a former soccer field, gets piled on either side so that you don't lose anything. You just move it aside for now, and then you fill it in with things like, if you notice in a forest, you see a log that's been sitting there a long time, it gets very moist, and the moisture is retained, and so this becomes like a water bed in a sense, if it's full of those kind of logs that have taken a lot of moisture in. And then we have all these cuttings when they were cleaning up, and everything that happens in the fall, you know, when you clean and cut branches down. So all of that, you can even put cotton underwear and stuff in it if you're so inclined, but nothing that won't decompose. So you can't put rayon or polyester. No polyester. All cotton, because it will decompose. The others will never. So anyway, here we are. So that's the Hugelkultur mound at the beginning, and this is just like some of the additives. So instead of having something that goes to the brush pile or, you know, something you got to get rid of, now we incorporate it. And you see some of this would be a view from the last Hugelkultur over to the Regina parking lot here, and then this is the asparagus bed. Stan planted, what, how many, 270? 270 asparagus plants. So next year in the fall, anybody wants to come, Joan has already promised that she'll be one of the asparagus pickers, Joan Mary, and anybody can come join her. And so we'll have them, you know, in the campus. It'll be wonderful. And so anyway, here's some more of the things that were added. This is what they look like as, besides you have all of that bottom material, then you start layering on a lot of compost, which we got from our own compost bin, a lot of manure that's already coming from the stables, so it's mixed in with hay and straw and leftover things that they don't eat, and so on. So it's a very fertile mixture, and our hope is that it will always be moist. Stan planted buckwheat for the first crop, and buckwheat is, as you know, a really good grain, and I looked up a lot of stuff about it, but I'll spare you now because we don't have the time. Anyway, buckwheat takes root quickly, and so you get a lot of green matter, and it's also in itself edible. You know, like buckwheat pancakes, as Scott told me, are very good. And then, you know, what is left over, then it just becomes part of the green matter that's added in. Stan, do you want to say anything else? Use the microphone, please. Oh, here. Is it on? Okay. Hang on to it in case I ask you again. Okay.
Hello?
Yeah.
There it is. Yeah, the buckwheat, we just wanted to get some roots in there really quick because we were afraid if we had a hard rain, it would wash all our manure away, which wouldn't be good. Because it was pretty steep mounds. And like she said, you throw the buckwheat on there, and then you turn your back and turn back around, and it's buckwheat. It's really fast. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then we planted berries. We've got 4 mounds out there now. You see up there is raspberries. Well, we've got thornless blackberries, black, gold, and red raspberries, about 5 cultivars of raspberry, and we've got high bush cranberries and strawberries out there now too. And we sheet mulch that too. Where the straw is, there's cardboard as a weed barrier, and then just threw the straw on top of that. It breaks apart, stuff comes up through it, and then we just keep adding more because as it breaks down, it just adds more organic matter. But that first berm that we did, the first mound that we did right there, if you get a chance to go out there in a little while and look at it, that one is loaded with berries this year.
Okay.
While they're not ripe yet, but yes, when they're
John,
ripe
Larry,
in about 2
Joan,
weeks,
would you go
we
tell
encourage
Ray
you to
that
go eat as many as you
we're
can.
still in here. He's got the band out there, Ray the driver.
And also eat the service berries that are growing up
would you
behind
tell-
Madden right now because they're really
Just tell
good.
him we're still here. He's waiting for us. Okay. All right. This is how the cardboard's put around and then the straw on top. We're going to move quickly. This is a raspberry bush now. And then when we get to the first video here, it's going to be Vandana. And it's part of the video that we came back with from India. And let's see, so that's the asparagus bed. Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Use small and slow solutions. This reminds me of the banks. They're too big to fail, you know. The bigger they are, the harder they fall, and so on. Nature doesn't rush, although we haven't learned that. We rush a lot. Anyway, this was an experiment. We heard that Irish Spring soap would deter the deer. It doesn't. but we put a number of them out there. Garlic at the base of fruit trees is also supposed to be a kind of deterrent and to keep a nice balance of things. We'll see. We have some and they're coming up, and so that's a pending. And then the marsh milkweed, we planted a number of those in the rain gardens, but if you walk around when it's not soaking wet, we have a lot of milkweed in the field, lots and lots of it. Joan?
Do we have monarch caterpillars yet?
Well, I haven't seen them. I don't think they come when it's this wet, and I think they come when my memory is it's later in the season.
I got some pictures from a friend in Wisconsin. She's got caterpillars on her milkweed.
Yeah. Well, I didn't see any yet. The question was, do we have any monarch caterpillars? We got a lot of milkweed. All right, and then the use and value of diversity. The next thing is going to be Vandana's, a little interview with Vandana that Pat Seaman and Corinne Sanders, this is a devil, isn't it, when you forget all these things? Corinne Sanders, with whom I work all the time. Anyway, so it begins with this interview with, so she jumps right in, is what I want to warn you. And there's a lot of birds in the background, so that makes it sometimes hard to hear. But Vandana Shiva is known internationally as somebody who really works to protect biodiversity and to keep us safe from Monsanto and places like that. So this is her.
Well, you know, because we've been governed by a mechanistic mind, which is very static, you know, you put this, you get this, and I've had so many agriculture scientists saying, oh, we don't have enough organic matter to get the kind of crops we need. And I always say, but why do you assume that organic matter has to be measured in its NPK? It's the potential of the soil organisms to convert that organic matter into all kinds of soil nutrients. That's what you don't see. It's not an input-output linear system. Activism is also not a linear system. Activism, like ecology, is a transformative evolutionary system, which means at every point, new processes are being unleashed. At every point, new potential is being created. And that's why I see the highest promise from the very simple act of saving seeds and growing food. If you see it mechanically, it looks trivial, it looks small. When you see it ecologically in the context of the earth, that act of saving seed is sowing the seeds of another way of being on this planet. Saying no to all the power of the violence of a violent economic system. All the power of corporations who would like to bully everyone and say, eat toxics, eat GMOs. But it is also putting one's trust in the seed and saying, I know you'll grow, and with you I'll grow. A little garden in the balcony, in a pot, basically changes the discourse. Because if you don't do that, the only thing you can do is shout at Monsanto, beg a corrupt government who is working for Monsanto to not work for Monsanto and work for the earth and people, and that's all that carries on. But the minute you sow a seed and grow a crop, the discourse becomes, what's the potential of the seed and the soil and society? And you work on that potential.
She's so positive. I mean, I've heard her speak a couple of times, and she's indefatigable, really, in the true Dominican definition. So to use edges and value the marginal, we talked about that a little earlier, and that edges are the places where a lot of growth happens. Somebody asked, what did somebody ask about? Something about where the property of the of Sienna is all up over in here. Anyway. So this is the Charlotte's Web garden that Stan has worked on diligently for the last several weeks. And it's going to be a community garden. And he's going to explain that when he talks to the college students, which will be the next little video that we'll have. And why it's called that and where it is. Now, I just wanted to show you that it's down here. It's right in here. Yeah. Okay. So it's right in here. This was a tennis court. It's been ripped up. And a lot of the stones that came from old sidewalks is what's been built into an herb spiral, which you'll see down there. And then this is the was the former, another field. So it's right in here. All right, now bring on Stan.
What we're working on today is a community garden. We've got 2 community gardens planned. This one, and then where you see the crushed limestone slab over here, that one's going to be elevated beds, 2-foot beds, going to be handicap accessible. But this one is just a regular old ground level community garden. When you get out here and see the pattern, it looks kind of like a spider web, and so we've named it Charlotte's Garden, or Charlotte's Web Community Garden. And we've got 20 beds in there, and each of the beds will be named after a character. We keep all the cardboard from the Motherhouse because the stuff, we use it to sheet mulch. What it does is you put it down, it becomes a weed barrier, and it also prevents moisture evaporation. We're going to use a lot of cardboard today. The first thing we do, the very first step in the preparation of the paths, we do the paths first and the beds second. First thing we do in preparation of the paths are marked out here with the string, is you lay the cardboard down. Don't be stingy with the cardboard. Overlap it, don't leave any holes in there. If there's a tiniest little bit of light getting in, something will find its way through there. Plants are very persistent. And make sure that you bring your border pretty well outside. I made the mistake of bringing them in a little too close. It's going to make it difficult later when we have to overlap the cardboard on the beds. But this is basically what you're looking for right here. So once you get this down, then somebody, 1 or 2 of you, will be using the wheelbarrows to bring over little piles of the riprap. Okay, that's this crushed concrete. This is recycled concrete that we get from a guy down the road. So this is recycled. The cardboard is recycled. The wood chips come from the city. They're all recycled. That's stuff they chew up from storm damage. The herb spiral that we built over here is recycled concrete from the city. The filler in there is manure from the fairgrounds and compost. The compost comes from our kitchen. We compost everything that comes out of the kitchen down here. So everything, permaculture is an ethical design system. And the idea is, one of the ideas is that there's no such thing as waste. It's just an unused resource. Plants are just like us. Microorganisms that we like to encourage their growth in the soil are just like us. They need the same thing we do. They need oxygen, they need water, and some of them need light. We want to make sure they get more oxygen and water. And we don't till. We don't till because it tears up the root structure too much, and that root structure down there is a community of microorganisms, of fungi, of arthropods, and they work together. And plants that put their roots down within that community are much stronger and resilient than they are when you just chew it up like that year after year. That's also the single biggest cause of carbon emissions in the world. It's not automobiles, it's high-intensity monoculture agriculture from tilling, because every time they roll that over, there's this burst of biotic activity that creates a big bolus of carbon. And work your way back up. That just creates channels down there for water and oxygen to get into the roots.
The Charlotte's Web garden is designed to be a community garden, and Stan is going to talk to those of us who want to walk down there when we get there or drive down there. But anyway, it's the idea that the characters in Charlotte's Web are what each section is named after. And then we talk about the things that had to be done to get the garden ready. And there's a demonstration that you'll see at some other time of using that broad fork I was telling you about to open up, so that the plants need oxygen, water, food, room to grow, as do all creatures. The different characters in the Charlotte's Web. And then this is what Stan designed and built out of repurposed sidewalks and things that he finds from the city. City has kind of like a dump site, and he's a great scavenger and knows where all these good things are. So anyway, you'll see it up close, and it's a very beautiful design. Anyway, it's got herbs in it. For example, Italian parsley. I wish I'd remembered that the other night because I needed it for a recipe, and I could have just grabbed it there. Anyway, this is made from repurposed concrete, compost from the kitchen resources, manure from the fairgrounds, shredded leaves, and grass. So the whole thing is filled that. So it's very fertile. In fact, it's just overabundant right now. If you get up close, you can see there's a huge biodiversity. That's it. You're very welcome.